Written in the Stars, a spiritual journey. Since the beginning of time, mankind has been fascinated by the star-filled heavens, sensing a deep message in their cyclic changes and patterns. From very early times, he watched and started recording the appearance of certain star patterns on the horizon, and then realised they correlated with physical changes here on Earth. Thus, the combined science of astronomy and astrology came into being. Now, in order to accurately observe and to record cyclic movements and patterns, we have to have a fixed point or a norm, so that we can say different to, or more, or less than, or beyond, or something like that. And so to achieve this, the ancients built astronomical observatories, like Stonehenge, and the Great Pyramids at Giza in Egypt, and Machu Pichu in Mexico. From these fixed points, they could regularly observe the heavens to establish the stable patterns, and from this note any deviations from the norm. Hence it became possible to predict certain conjunctions and cycles, and the likely effects of these. They were also able to note any new or unusual movements, and therefore prepare themselves for the results of these changes. Over many, many millennia, the ancients gradually came to understand the greater galaxy of which we are a part, and through this, how they belonged to the whole. There evolved a greater sense of eternity, of the purpose and the plan of things, and of their minute part in it. Somehow now they felt they belonged, and they had some understanding. Gradually, the awareness dawned that everything was cyclic, and that everything followed repeatable patterns which could be predicted and planned for. It's just that sometimes some of these cycles are so incredibly large that to our human scale they appear to be one-off events. Now, every cycle has an influence, an energy effect, a potential. And if we know when these influences are expected, we can prepare for them and use them more effectively. This combined science of astrology, astronomy, remained one science up until the 19th century, and the age of rationalism was in sway. Now, astronomy and astrology are terms that we've all heard many, many times before. But what exactly are they, and what are the differences? Well, astronomy looks at the heavens from the overview as we know it to be. That is, planets travelling around the Sun in separate, predetermined, orderly orbits, forming our solar system as part of the greater galaxy. Through this science of astronomy, we know what is actually happening. Astrology looks at things quite differently, not from the astronomy overview, but rather from the personal viewpoint, as it appears to us from our little vantage point on Earth. From this perspective, sometimes planets appear to be travelling backwards. We call that retrograde, only to suddenly begin to move forwards again. Sometimes they appear to be entering some other planet's territory, that is, its house or a sign, or to be travelling with different companions at different times. They can also appear to be in odd configurations, in lines or triangles or squares or opposition points. Now, this doesn't mean that the planets change their orbits. It just means, from where we stand, it looks like it. It's very much the same as being at the traffic lights and the car next to you moves, and you feel as if you are rolling backwards and slam on the brakes. It's all about perception. Why is perception so important? Well, ask the advertising industry. You see, our brain and body react to perception as if it were reality. We're all familiar with that, things that go bump in the dark reactions. This is why astrology is so important, and why we are affected by the zodiacal energies. The zodiac. What actually is the zodiac? Again, it's a word we're all familiar with, but what actually does it mean? Well, the word actually has several ancient words contributing to its meaning. The first one is a Hebrew word, sodi, and it means a circular way or a path. The other words are Greek words. One means zoe, meaning life. Another one meaning a dikos, meaning wheel. And the last one, zoon, meaning animal. So basically we have a circular way or path that is a path of life, like a wheel. And there are animals involved, which is not a bad description of those houses of the zodiac or the signs of the zodiac as we talk about. Now again, this zodiac, this way or path, is an imaginary view line or a field of vision which forms a circular band in the cosmos as seen from our planet Earth. A little bit like a super large belt in space at the level of the equator. Again, like the others, it is a perception. It doesn't actually exist as a belt, but it is that as we look out into space from round about the equator level, we see this band of stars or this band of constellations in our view line, and so we see it like a band of stars. This band or belt in the heavens is divided into 12 sections, which we call houses. They are named after the constellations which roughly occupied that space in the heavens. These are star groups which move so slowly that they appear to be fixed stars. To us here on Earth, however, they do actually move, but very, very slowly. So slowly, in fact, that the ancients used them as fixed points or markers from which to measure other points or relationships. They named these houses or sections of the zodiac after patterns they saw in those star configurations. Thus, over time, the names became part of the qualities that these archetypal images expressed. So things like leonine or scorpic or virginal. Remember, an archetype is just a perfect or a typical specimen of the thing. These signs were named in ancient times and can be seen carved in stone on ancient monuments in many places on Earth. They are the familiar 12 signs of the zodiac. It is this imaginary or perceptual band which provides us with certain cyclic influences in our yearly pattern via the monthly zodiac. For as I mentioned before, this band of stars is divided into 12 signs, 12 equal parts, which give us our monthly zodiac. If we know and begin to understand the energies that each month presents, and the lessons that come with it, we can progressively explore our awareness and build our resilience, making our lives more effective and fulfilling. As I mentioned before, the zodiac is divided into 12 signs, and each sign was named after its original occupant, a very major constellation of stars far out in the cosmos. The planets of our solar system use these 12 signs as their home, colouring it with their energies. But as these planets are very mobile, they will stay in another planet's home sign, sometimes briefly, sometimes for much longer periods, maybe even years. Sometimes the planets share accommodation. Other times they'll swap accommodation, a little like overseas exchange students. Whatever scenario is happening at any given time, it naturally influences the energies emanating from that sign. For example, it's a bit like having a Japanese exchange students, and that may cause you to eat differently. Or if you have a house full of guests, it can disrupt family patterns and harmonies. Just so with the planets as they reside for a time in someone else's house. Whenever we enter a zodiac sign, we are entering an energy field similar to someone's home. That energy field is coloured by its original occupants, the zodiac sign, as well as the person now using it as home, the ruling planet, and, of course, all of the visitors to that home. Naturally, sometimes, depending on the occupants, the energy can become very difficult, or very hyped up, or very serene and quiet. Knowing what to expect when we enter a sign will help us to prepare appropriately, and thus not overreact when we find a house party going on instead of a quiet tete-a-tete with a friend. These 12 signs of the zodiac are sequentially offering us possibilities for learning and growth as spiritual beings having a human experience. The energies are distinctly different, and they complement each other beautifully as we move from one to another on our spiritual journey each year. So let's look very briefly at these 12 signs. The first sign, Aries, is a dynamic fire sign, embodying the first flush of energy to initiate action, a little bit like the firing up of an engine. The second sign is Taurus, a grounding earth sign, embodying all of the energies of desire, for desire is the motivator, pushing us onwards to achieve. The third sign is Gemini, an air sign, filled with ideas and creative consciousness, which is all-pervading if we tap into it. These initial 3 signs represent the primary 3 energies which form the trinities on earth in every religion and philosophy, whether we look at the Father, Son, Holy Spirit of Christian terminology, or the Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva of Hindu terminology, or our very familiar will, love and consciousness in the wisdom teachings. Wherever we are, those triads or triplicities will always be present. Because we live in a 3-dimensional world, these 3 energies are present in all creation here on earth. Indeed, these 3 energies are necessary for any creation here on earth to be possible. We might express them as will, desire, and consciousness. In the wisdom teachings, they are known as the primary 3 rays, the rays of will, love wisdom, and active intelligence. More about those later as we look at the individual signs. So now, after the initial 3 signs, the next 6 signs in our zodiac journey allow us to develop as human beings, gradually broadening our experience until we are able to express more of our true self, our spirituality. So the 4th sign is Cancer, a water sign, known as the giver of form. It is our entrance into the world of matter and experience as part of the mass of humanity. It represents our physical birth. The 5th sign is Leo, again a fire sign, and our opportunity to develop a personality and become an independent individual apart from the mass. The 6th sign is Virgo, an earth sign, reminding us of the bounty of earth and its ultimate purpose, to provide a vehicle for the spirit within which to develop and grow, like a seed sprouting. The 7th sign is Libra, a delicate air sign, in which we have to find the balance between our physical personality self and the finer energetic spiritual self discovered in Virgo. The 8th sign is Scorpio, an emotional water sign, where we test our boundaries and the personality fights the higher spiritual self for supremacy. The 9th sign is Sagittarius, a fire sign filled with aspiration towards spirit, high ideals, high goals, inspirational action and intentions are found here. Then we come to the final 3 signs. The final 3 signs are known as the surface signs. Ideally, if we have learned from our schooling and integrated the lessons of the previous 6 signs, we will now be a more integrated, soul-filled human being, ready to go beyond self and serve others, paving the way for future growth and development on spiritual levels. So the 10th sign is Capricorn, an earth sign, which is like the graduation point, the gateway into the spiritual worlds, just as Cancer was the gateway into the physical worlds. Now we can live as a soul, having an earthly experience. The 11th sign is Aquarius, an air sign symbolizing universality, inclusiveness, and a sense of group. Its keynote is service for the good of the whole. The 12th sign is Pisces, a water sign of great sensitivity to the needs of others, and therefore of the need to return back and help. It is known as the sign of the world saviour. Thus completes our zodiac cycle. But we repeat these zodiac sign lessons on a yearly basis throughout our lives. Understanding the signs gives us some insight into how to handle the energies and the opportunities, so that each year we grow and develop our potential further. When we do this, we feel a sense of purpose and fulfillment. If, however, we fail to address the lessons, each succeeding year appears to become more and more challenging as the soul pushes the personality to grow and to improve. And when we constantly ignore these inner urges and expressions of truth, life can become very miserable and difficult indeed. Fortunately, the universe constantly provides us with the opportunity for a fresh start. For at any point in time, we can seek to understand the current energies lesson and thus learn from the experiences presented, and then begin to move forward again. The zodiac energies come from the cosmos to us via the signs and the planets, which acts like relay stations for the energy, very much like the mobile phone towers relay the satellite messages. And very similar to our mobile phones, some people will receive the energy loud and clear, and some will have fuzzy reception. Others will drop out or overreact depending on the system and the state of its sensitivity. And some may even have their phones switched off. Each sign or house is like a different coloured plane of glass through which the sun shines in sequence. The colour falls on everything during that period, and everything reacts to that vibration to a greater or lesser degree. One of the other words we need to look at is horoscope. We all know about our individual horoscope, and almost everyone finds it irresistible to check themselves whenever they come up against a horoscope in a magazine or a paper. So what exactly is a horoscope? And how can it actually influence us, or what exactly does it do? Well, we're all familiar with the popular daily paper or magazine level of horoscope prediction, which usually gives us a very broad, generalised picture of the energies for each of us on that day. It's a little like a very generalised weather forecast. A horoscope is actually a picture of the star patterns at the moment of our birth. It is our very individual and very personal map for life. It comes from an old French, well, 2 words, not 1 word, 2 words. Horo, meaning hour, and scopus, meaning observer. And it shows the strengths and the weaknesses, the talents and the abilities, and the likely bumpy spots in our life. It's a little like a road map, a guide or an indicator. It plots the areas where the roads are windy or difficult, or whether there are freeways or only dirt tracks. Naturally, how we deal with these is entirely up to us. A horoscope is no more predictive than the millways. It's just a road map for life. And a wise person checks the map for the journey. When our personal horoscope map is overlaid by the current zodiac sign or colour, it is as if the weather conditions enhance our road or make it slippery and treacherous. Again, if we're aware of these things, we can prepare more fully and appropriately for the journey, and therefore maximise our growth and learning along the way. The horoscope, our personal horoscope, truly is our personal millways. It's the map for our life. The monthly zodiac predictions are really the weather patterns which will overlay that map. And if we're smart, when we're heading out for something important, we'll check the map and the weather before we set out. I always like to say that life lived without astrological information is like trying to do business in a foreign city without a map. You'll get there eventually, but it would have been simpler and less time-consuming with a map. Each monthly zodiac sign presents us with certain energetic opportunities or vibratory patterns. It's up to us, each one of us, to use these energies in a positive, uplifting way, so that as we grow and progress in our evolution as souls in the most efficient manner possible. If we choose to ignore the opportunity, we may find our soul presents to us some extra challenges and lessons in order for us to get back on track. We'll learn more about each sign and its energies in the following CDs, along with some exercises and some positive suggestions to help us maximise the time. Meanwhile, there are some other influences we need to be aware of, such as the full moons, the solstices, and the equinoxes. Firstly, let's look at the full moons. Number one thing is to realise that the moon is a dead planet, and it has no life of its own. In our solar system, it acts like a mirror, reflecting the light of the sun back to Earth. So when we talk about the full moon, we're really saying that when we see the full face of the moon, the sun's spiritual energy is reaching Earth without any impediments. Perhaps we really should start saying at the time of the full sun, because that would actually be more accurate. What we call the full moon happens once every 28 days. So generally, there is one full moon in each zodiac sign. But because our calendar month is just a little bit longer than 28 days, about every 3 years we end up with one extra full moon. And in that case we will have 2 full moons in one sign. And then we call the second one a blue moon, because it happens so rarely. Now, since time immemorial, the full moon cycles have been experienced as magical times of great energy influence. We have only to observe the ocean tides to see just how much the moon's magnetic pull can affect our material world here on Earth. And because the moon has such a strong gravitational pull on the tides, and indeed on any body of water, and it's interesting to note that scientists claim they can even measure the tidal effect in a cup of coffee, then it would be very foolish to imagine that full moons did not affect us poor mere mortals whose physical body is approximately 80% water. Interestingly, surgeons have noticed a difference in blood flow during surgery in accordance with the different stages of the moon's cycles. And when the police department and those who deal with the mentally distressed roster extra staff at the full moons, one has to realise that there are effects which should be taken into account. We know there are significant and measurable increases in electromagnetic energy during the full moon period. And it is this energy which registers in the human nervous system, which is probably the finest receptor of all for such energy. If our nervous system is sensitive or damaged with drugs or excessive radiation, then the increased electromagnetic reaction at the time of the full moon is enough to tip us over. a little like a frayed electrical cord blowing a fuse when we plug it in. Conversely, if our nervous system is strong and healthy, full moons are an opportunity to increase the energy stimulation, to grow and achieve even greater things. This is why in many places around the world, people gather together to meditate at the time of the full moon. The collective energy allows greater focus and therefore usage of the incoming forces for evolutionary good. It stimulates great ideas and inventions, and schemes and projects for human upliftment, and positive political decisions for the greater good of the whole. Can you imagine what positive good might be achieved for the earth and the whole of humanity if a very positive majority joined in the full moon work? In this series of CDs, there is one for each of the zodiac signs, with a suggested meditation to use around the time of the full moon. Most major newspapers give the full moon times, or buy a diary and calendar with them marked on it. Or ideally, you could join us here at Gita for the group meditation. Please phone for dates and for times. And now, the solstices. The word comes from two Latin words, sol, meaning sun, and sister, to stand still, and literally means when the sun appears to stand still. It marks the point where the sun is overhead at either the Tropic of Cancer or the Tropic of Capricorn. Here in our southern hemisphere, the summer solstice is around the 21st of December and marks the longest amount of daylight. Correspondingly, it is the shortest day in the northern hemisphere and marks the winter solstice for them. Our winter solstice here in Australia is around the 21st of June and marks our shortest day, whilst the northern hemisphere is celebrating their summer solstice and longest day. Now these 2 points were critical to know in ancient times, for man depended entirely on the sun for warmth, growth of food, and availability of prey for hunting. When the sun left, life became very much a fight for survival, and it was essential to be able to predict such patterns and prepare for them. From winter solstice came many rituals to mark the turning point, to encourage the sun to return quickly. Hence the use of bonfires, firebrands, candles, crystals, and anything which would reflect or create light. In later times, the light became a metaphor for the wisdom teachings, which periodically seemed to be almost overwhelmed by darkness and ignorance, just like the winter darkness makes summer's warmth only a memory. At Gita, we acknowledge the winter solstice with our sacred ceremony of light, celebrating the light present in all things, ready to shine forth, given the right conditions. The winter solstice is quite an introspective energy. We are focused deep within our own being, and seek to strengthen the inner light and the soul connection there. It is a time of affirming ourselves as spiritual beings having a human experience. By contrast, the summer solstice is at the height of summer, filled with outgoing, expansive energy. It is a carefree, voluptuous time, with warmth, time to play a little, plenty of ripe fruits and bountiful living. Here in the southern hemisphere it corresponds to Christmas and is usually celebrated as part of the festive holiday season. Interestingly, in ancient times, December the 25th was a pagan sun festival. It was later taken over by the early church fathers, somewhere around about the mid-300 AD, and it was declared then to be the birthday of Jesus. Like summer, Christmas, which actually means Christ's coming, is a time of bountiful gifts, of sharing and of inclusiveness, and celebration of warmth and good feelings. One can't help but wonder sometimes what went wrong. And now we come to the last ones, the equinoxes, those halfway points between the summer and winter solstices, hence the name equinox, again Latin, meaning equal length of day and night, or the brief moment when night and day are exactly equal length. In the southern hemisphere, the 21st of March is the autumnal equinox and marks the beginning of autumn. The 25th of September is the vernal or spring equinox and marks the beginning of spring. Naturally, in the northern hemisphere, it is the reverse. And do remember these dates are approximate because they vary a day or so each year. These halfway points mark the change of energies, like the turn of tides at the beach, and reminds us to prepare appropriately. These 4 marker points of the sun's yearly activity create our 4 seasons, and are types of energy influence which are felt in many areas of life, not only in the physical seasons or the weather or the patterns of the winds. For example, we do talk about the seasons of our life. We talk about the youthful springtime of life, or the fullness of the summer of our life, or we talk about the autumn of life. We also use the same terminology about the 4 phases of the moon. The beginning moon is the spring moon. The very last quarter of the moon is like the winter moon. We also use those terms as colourings, spring colours or autumn colours. So those seasonal influences are everywhere throughout our world. It's interesting that modern man has lost that connection and sensitivity to those seasonal energies, and consequently often feels very out of sync with the world in which he lives. And that being out of sync creates tensions and stresses which could be easily avoided. A more conscious alignment with the energies would lighten the load of wear and tear on the nerves considerably, and that would release greater energies for growth, for development, and for fulfillment of our potential. In order to maximize our growth and the benefits from the 12-monthly cycle of the zodiac, it's helpful if we understand certain things. Firstly, that the cycle of the 12 signs and their energies present to us a pathway of growth and development. Each year we have the opportunity to clarify, upgrade, and expand our understandings of the lessons presented. Secondly, that this pathway is ultimately a spiritual journey, one which allows us to constantly refine and progress towards a greater spiritual consciousness. Thirdly, that each sign offers us lessons to learn and an opportunity to grasp the needed energies to achieve that learning if we use them wisely. Fourthly, it also gives us helpful insights into where others are coming from and how to handle situations more effectively. It's also useful to understand that the lessons are progressive from 1 to 12, just as in school. Hence the importance of those first 3 signs in building the foundations for later growth. Lastly, it's useful to be aware that our physical bodies are subtly attuned to the seasonal rhythms and patterns, and that the more we aim to honour these cycles, the happier and healthier our physical body will be. We'll explore all of these energies and aspects much more fully on the CD for the appropriate sign.